I'm not a ranger yet, but I will be in the future.
Once a ranger,
Always a ranger.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Once a Ranger. This week, we're doing a special break episode, and we're watching the 2017 Power Rangers movie. As mentioned in our last episode, we thought this was a perfect time to do that because we just got introduced to Tommy, and this movie is encompassing everything before then. And what we are very, very excited to hear is Akil, who has never seen it before, because us three, we love this movie. Me, Nub, and Nick love this movie. So let's start off, Akil.
Yeah.
What are your feelings?
Oh no, you guys are not gonna like what I have to say.
No.
All right, everybody, podcast over. We're kicking him off, and then we'll continue.
You guys can catch me on my other podcast, Local Chai, where I can't get kicked off.
Self-plug.
My overall thought for this movie was it was written to be a Power Rangers movie, and that was fantastic. But it was acted and filmed and like post-production and effects and everything to not be a Power Rangers movie and to just be a generic 2010s action movie that's like gray and dusty and sad.
Yeah, I can agree to that.
I can understand that.
Yeah.
That is the reason why I like it, ironically.
Okay.
This is like,
Yeah.
it's like at the beginning of like, or not the beginning, but it's just part of that pile of like action films that are trying to be like really dark and deep, and it's like they throw a couple jokes at Michael Bay too, because it's very much like early Transformers films kind of vibe.
This one, Transformers 2017's The Mummy, like Thor the Dark World, they all sort of blend together because of the style.
Maybe that's why it failed in the box office.
I'm sure that's why. I think like the writing was perfect for Power Rangers, but like the whole aesthetic of the movie was very just bland, I guess. It needed more color.
That's fair. I can understand
it was the DC-ification of superheroes. I think in terms of the color scheme, I can agree with that. Except Rita's very colorful. Like her green. Yeah,
I think
green.
Elizabeth Banks and Rita in general was like the one thing that stayed the most true to Power Rangers.
Oh yeah.
And then Goldar kind of
because Billy was very authentically Billy, and so was Jason. Jason and Billy, I think, were really on par, and I also think Kimberly was, because I always believed Kimberly was a mean girl.
We have discussed this at length. So.
The most changes were to like Trini and Zach. Yeah. But I like those changes. I felt like their changes were like undeniable.
Zach was still like, it was different, but he was still I've always viewed Zach as kind of like he likes attention. So Zach in this way, even though he was way more of a, I don't even want to call him a bad boy, but he was just a lot of attitude and very rebellious, but he still was like always craving that attention, always making remarks and trying to like just get people to notice him kind of thing. So I felt like there was a lot of spirit of the original characters that still fit, even if they weren't exactly like copies,
like them.
Yeah,
no, I agree. Like, except for maybe Trini, who I think is the heart of the original Power Ranger series. And I understand why they changed her, because they don't know each other. And I think that's really important when you're looking into why these characters are the way they are, as opposed to how the MMPR original series is. They don't know each other. And immediately, so as a bias, I love Letty Lynn, right? Like the actor who played Zach. He's so good. And I think that, like, you know, he doesn't care if the movie's going to be bad. He just is in it because he loves it, and you can tell, right? Like, same with Mortal Kombat. He knew what he was getting into. So... And then we also have Princess Jasmine. And then we also have
I love Naomi Scott.
Naomi Scott. She's
obsessed with Naomi Scott.
Jason, who is in Stranger Things, like these
Billy
actors.
in Stranger Things. That's very confusing.
RJ is also RJ probably has the most like success, I guess, of the four. He's in The Harder They Fall, and he's in a lot of other projects. And I watched the director's commentary for this, and the director Dean Israelite was even saying like RJ was in line for a couple other projects, so he kind of had to convince him to get him to like take this project over the other ones. So it's like, yeah, RJ I don't know, they all have a lot of success though, but like just that's what's also wild is all these actors either were already successful or then like post the movie they still had a lot more success.
Yeah, and that kind of breaks my heart that this movie didn't do well, because I think that you can tell everyone loved Power Rangers, especially Ryan Cranston is, what's his name?
Bryan Cranston.
Bryan Cranston.
Yeah.
Sorry, I wanted to say Billy, and I was like, no, that's wrong. He's named after him. But he is in the original Power Rangers. He's a voice actor in the original Power Rangers. He loves Power Rangers. So the fact that he came to be Zordon was so amazing. And I think all of them really wanted this movie to succeed. And one of the criticisms, and I mentioned this as a thing I like about it, every criticism like that was the best, was that it was a really long Krispy Kreme ad. And I love that. Like, I literally love that the center of all power in the universe was just at a Krispy Kreme. I remember when they did the advertising for this movie, Krispy Kreme had a bunch of Power Ranger donuts and whatnot.
You know how many times I went to Krispy Kremes in that month? I went so many times.
I didn't have any.
Krispy Kreme definitely recouped that investment.
Oh, man.
What?
I'm just remembering you guys are in the States, Minhas is in Toronto. Y'all have Krispy Kreme.
Yeah.
I don't
really have one near me though. I don't have one near me.
You don't need to cross international borders to get to one though.
Fair enough.
Yeah, or the whole country.
I might have to cross state lines though, because I don't know if they're or like go to the city.
In the West Coast, like Krispy Kremes is much more apparent, and they like strategically place them like right off freeways, high metro area. Like it was.
Damn.
My wife and I would drive to Disneyland, and anyone who's familiar with like the LA area, take the 91 all the way down. The 91 ends at like going west, and there's just like Krispy Kremes right there.
Yeah.
So my wife and I, we had passes at the time. So every Wednesday when we went, when the Power Rangers movie was out, I would get that Krispy Kreme's deal with, I think it was just 5 donuts, and they just had little lightning bolts on them.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
It was very sugary. I felt like I was gonna die each time.
But I was there.
I was there for it. So good. And I also had to go out of my way to get them because I think I was still living with my parents at the time. And we have like a couple. I think we have like 5 within the city. But they were all far from me. Now they're close to me. But that was. Sorry, go ahead.
I want to say though, I heard that criticism so much, and I completely disagree. Like, it's obviously product placement, but it's really not in the story as much as people cried about it being.
No,
like,
you're right.
It's so
it was in it for like one arc, basically.
Like it was mentioned when Billy discovered it, and then later on, there's the joke when they're tied up, and then Rita is just eating a donut. Like, that's literally, it's no more than like 2 minutes of screen or energy, and it's wild because like people made it seem like it was all over the movie with their critique of it, their criticism of it. And I was like, it's really not that big a deal.
Yeah.
And what I do like is the director, he was talking about it, they were trying to figure out where do they put the Zeo crystals, like where are we going to put them, and then the writer, John, I forgot his last name, but he apparently jokingly was like, oh, just like put them under the golden arches, like McDonald's.
Yeah.
And then Dean was like, that's actually not a bad idea. Like, what if we just put it, because like instead of it being in a quarry where like all of Power Rangers takes place, just put it like in, cities, civilization grew over it, and so it just happens to be under this very popular, establishment, and that's how people also navigate in cities and towns, right? Like, oh yeah, you take a right at the Krispy Kreme, and you're like, it's just I don't know, it worked for me.
Yeah, it worked for me too. Like I said, that criticism was one of the reasons I love that movie. I think there was a scene where Rita like sees a cup and she's like, the Krispy Kreme, and it's my favorite line. And it's like one of my favorite things because she's just an alien, right? She doesn't know what a Krispy Kreme is. She goes in and then she sees a donut and she eats it. Like, it's such an alien experience. And I'm like, this is exactly what it's like.
When she interrogates Billy,
she did.
Sorry,
go ahead. I was gonna say it's the same thing she did at the jewelry store. She just didn't know what
Yeah,
it was.
she just like,
And
what
it's
is this?
Eating stuff.
But yeah, when she interrogated Billy and he was just like, it's at a Krispy Kreme, and she's like, this is a really important establishment, isn't it? It's just like exactly what you're saying. Like she doesn't know what the hell a Krispy Kreme is.
It's pretty good, actually.
Yeah, it's also just a ridiculous product placement. Like if we look at Transformers, got a lot of flack for this around the same time. But like in Transformers, it's like crash into a truck of Bud Light and then drink the Bud Light so you can fight robots. And it's like they take themselves too seriously. Mountain Dew did the same thing. But this is just like, oh, the secret to life in the universe is in a Krispy Kreme. Like it's so ridiculous, and that's what makes it good.
That is what makes
Take
it
itself seriously.
Campiness, like rewatching the series and then watching the movie, it's like I don't know what people were complaining about. If you were like a big Power Rangers fan, I was like, like the whole show is kind of zany and ridiculous.
Yeah.
Most of the time. So it's like, okay, you go into this movie and there are just things in this movie that's just like completely insane. Yeah. And you're like, but like these guys are acting their heart out. They're really trying to make me believe. And I'm like, I'm about it. I believe it because watching the original series again and then again watching this movie, it's like, okay, yeah, this isn't like as crazy as I remember it was. I didn't watch it 4 times in theaters. So I just thought like the fatigue was on my head, and I was like, yeah, this isn't that bad.
Do you know what's funny though, Nick? Because I also watched it in theaters, and I felt personally responsible for its failure.
Same.
I was like, I love this movie. I went 4 times, and then it failed, and I was like, what did I do wrong?
One of my best friends who's also a huge Power Rangers fan. We both saw it together opening night, and then I saw it again. And then when the Blu-ray came out, we both went and bought the Blu-ray together. We're going to support this movie, and we're going to make it happen. We're going to make a sequel happen. My $20 are going to be the cause of the sequel. I don't care.
I did a lot of Googling after, because you guys know, I get really upset every time I watch it that there isn't a sequel, because I love these characters. They won me over immediately. I love the original Jason, and this Jason. Just all these characters seem like refined versions of what the original Power Rangers were. Even Zordon, like we always talk about how Zordon's kind of like a bad mentor.
Yeah,
here he really exemplifies that. He's the worst.
But he also has. It's not much of an arc, but he does have some character work, right? Whereas, like, the other Zordon was this sage, wise mentor, or portrayed as such. And it's just like, nothing happens with him. Like, he just is there. Whereas, like, this Zordon had his own mini arc to go through. Yes, it wasn't much, but, like, still, it was the fact that he was like, nah, I'm gonna take over. Screw this. Like, I was just like, whoa, okay, that's not the Zordon I know. Excuse you.
But we can see the flaws in this Zordon more so than we can see them in the show, and we can see why they're happened. So that the one great thing that I like about this movie, having been just introduced to the show this year, is that it explained a lot of things that were not explained in the show.
Right.
So like Zordon being one of them.
The opening.
Why the Zords are dinosaurs. That one explains
dinosaurs.
Why everything happens in a weird quarry.
Yes,
that's explained in this one. I don't like that they changed Angel Grove. There's no youth center.
So the thing that got taken out was like the youth center. There was no like hub where like they went to go hang out. There was no Bulk and Skull. I know that was like I remember like watching it and I was like, is that bully supposed to be like Bulk and Skull? I think, but this guy isn't likable ever. Like this guy is just not actually a person. Like he's such a one-dimensional thing that exists. And he's just there as like a catalyst to like engage the characters during detention.
Yeah,
but there's no time. Right? The movie isn't about. It's like you're learning about these characters for the first time.
They would have literally just been fan service. Honestly, it would just been like, oh, Bulk and Skull, and then they'd probably never get shown again. So it would have been like, would there be a point to it? Because they spend, other than that first like 20 minutes, they spend no time at school really. So like there would be no interaction with any character there. So I didn't even think about it until like this rewatch because I was like, oh yeah. There's no Bulk and Skull. Oh well, like I don't know. It didn't affect me.
Yeah, it didn't really affect me either. I did want to make note about Kimberly though, because we all know. I think she's a mean girl. Whatever. Here she acknowledges she's a mean girl. Okay, in the beginning, she like the girls are in the washroom and they're mean to her and you're supposed to feel bad, but then you find out later it was Kimberly who sucked. And then at the end she like butchers their car and she's like, that's what you get. I'm like, am I supposed to be on your side? Like, you're mean to them.
So like all of the Rangers have have arcs that are understandable, and I'm like, oh, like this kind of explains the way they are. And like my favorite scene is the fire pit scene, right? Because like Zach shares and then Jason's kind of like, you guys know who I am, like they'll kind of like they share and not share at the same time, and then like they're all like pouring their heart outs, right? And then Kim really is like, no, I don't want to share. And it's like you find out what it is and you're like, Billy's dad is dead. I don't know. like Zach's mom is dying.
Yeah.
I guess your problem's kind of a problem, but
as Thomas said, the world doesn't revolve around you.
I mean,
but like that's classic Kimberly as well.
It is. I agree, but it's also, I think remembering that they are teenagers, so at the end of the day, these situations are, real for them, right? And like I liked though that it wasn't she was a victim of cyber. It's a risky move to make one of your protagonists a cyberbully or a cyberbully. It's pretty to think like, oh, this is someone we're supposed to root for, like you're saying, Minhas. It's like, so I thought that was really bold of them to, instead of make her like, oh, I got cyberbullied, she was like, I did this terrible thing. And like I think the fact that she reconciles with herself and the fact that she did it is what is supposed to get us to feel a bit more empathy for her. And like it's also clearly like, I think again all these little things set up or are proof that Dean, the director, had this plan for more movies, so he's going to explore them way more than he got to in just this one movie. Because I think we would have seen definitely more of Trini, especially because she was probably the least developed.
You mean Dee Dee? I'm kidding.
Yeah. But like, yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No.
Point of, I totally agree with you. Asterisk, why was she still mean to them at the end?
I don't know.
That is the thing. Like everything else, I'm like, you know what? This is great, but like she's like, that's what you get. They don't. Why do they get that? Because they cut you off the cheerleading squad for something you did.
Yeah, I mean,
like they were. I don't know. Like they were just like they'd make like comments to her and they'd make her feel bad. It's like, I don't know. What you did was pretty gnarly.
I know. I think this, right? She's like. It got her dad involved. Like leaking news is no joke, right? Like at the end of the day, I would think that's the word. Like there's none of what these girls said even comes close to what Kimberly did.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, and it's warranted. Like I'm not saying you should bully your bullies, but I understand why they acted that way.
Yeah. Again, they are teenagers. There's some other behaviors. I was like, oh, that seems kind of like attention seeking. It's like, but they're teenagers, right? Like that's the whole point. That's the whole point of Jason's character when he does like the whole prank in the beginning. It's like he wants attention from his father. He has this weird like approval thing that he's trying to get over with his dad, and it's like he is like a leader, but I also feel like he has this like drive to prove his dad wrong the entire time. They are teenagers, and I feel like those teenage arcs really are worked really well within this movie.
Yeah,
it's just Kimberly is just like, I don't know. That was
it was a weird thing. I still love her. Like I all of these characters, I fell in love with them pretty much immediately. I don't see why people have issues with them. I think in their heart of hearts, they are the Rangers, right? Yeah. I think I really like. So Jason, as you were saying, is a leader, even though he's kind of like a degenerate in some ways. Immediately with Billy, we see that, right? He stops Billy from getting bullied, and from that moment on. So the reason why I say Akil, this Billy is exactly like MMPR Billy, is because he still has like that nerdy-esque, I'm not a fighter, but becomes a fighter character. But they're in the show, Billy looks to Jason a lot, and Jason always pulls him into his strengths. And we see that in this as well. So they don't even know each other. Jason saves Billy, and then Billy is immediately like, we're friends now, and this is the stuff we're going to go on. Throughout the movie, he doesn't talk to everyone else the same way he talks to Jason. Anytime something happens, he's like, Jason, this thing is happening. Jason, this thing is happening. Jason, this thing is happening. And I really like that because it really shows the kind of relationship. And the fact that they made Billy neurodivergent as well, I think, again, it's like one of those things where they refine the characters, really just to bring them out to the best versions that they could be.
Yeah, I mean, again, with the director commentary, the writer was even saying he specifically wanted to, like, have these situations and these, things going on in their life that were applicable to 2017, right? And so, cyberbullying, and then your sexuality, and like these things that are way more within the cultural zeitgeist being discussed more. Obviously, these things have always existed, but just like, well, cyberbullying, but you know what I mean, right? So he was like very same thing with Billy, and like he was very passionate about wanting to have those elements to these characters to make them fit the current conversation.
Yeah.
You were gonna say something, like, sorry.
No, that's why I think this Billy was way, way better than Mighty Morphin Billy. I feel like I'm still going to rack on Mighty Morphin Billy.
Oh, no, I was smiling because I was like, plus he didn't say, techno babble that didn't make any sense.
No, Alpha did.
I feel like this Billy was way more authentic to himself. And that came out into his character. And I think, like, that's the reason that he morphed first. Whereas... I feel like the TV show Billy just isn't. I don't know if it's the writing or if it's on purpose, but I feel like he isn't as genuine as this Billy is, and he has a lot of walls put up, and maybe that's why there's the techno babble. Whereas this Billy seems a lot more authentic and therefore a lot more relatable, whether you're neurodivergent or not.
Right. I think. Well, Akil's only experienced like the first half. Not even the whole half. Not even the whole half of the first movie of Power Rangers.
All of you guys love Billy from Mighty Morphin, so I'm assuming he gets better.
Billy's there until what? Turbo? That's
Zeo.
But
all the way out. I'm to Zero. So it's like he's there for a long time to like really flesh out his character.
4 or 5 years. Yeah.
And he's coming back. So
he's coming back.
Mentioning Zeo. I want to talk about the beginning, because when I first saw this movie in theaters and the opening scene is in the prehistoric era, I was like, what movie am I watching? Because I was thrown off. I was like, and then you see the Rangers and the costumes, and then Zordon, demorphs and everything. I was like, oh, we're getting like a proper backstory to Zordon and Rita. Like, as we've mentioned, like it's been hinted at and kind of touched upon in the show, but this movie really like solidified what their relationship is, whether it's canon or not in the greater universe, who cares? Like, they established this lore that Rita was a ranger and she decided to become evil, and that's why she has the green power coin. And then also they established that Zordon caused the death of the dinosaurs.
Send down the meteor.
Zordon caused the extinction.
Just like annihilate the entire species on Earth. Sure, why not?
What is everybody's thoughts of Alpha? Because
I love it.
Okay, I don't know if I'm in the minority here. I liked Alpha. I thought he was definitely a character choice, excuse me. But if you look at each of the character choices that they did in terms of like Goldar, in terms of Alpha, in terms of the actual Zords, I think the aesthetics all work, right? Like he's again, a refined version of what this show Alpha would still be. Like he's just as quirky, like he's just as like excited about the youths, but he's still like smart, and he does the ay and all that stuff, but it doesn't feel out of place. Another criticism is people didn't like Goldar's look either, but I'm like, no, it makes sense. Yeah. He's a gold man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I got your faces like this is gross, but like,
no, I agree, kind of. I think with all the design choices of the Zords and Alpha and Goldar and the suits and like the general aesthetic of thing, it all works together. That doesn't mean that I like it.
That's true.
I think
That's
Alpha
fair.
looks gross. But I also think Goldar looks gross.
That's interesting.
I think that the suits look gross.
I like the mechanic of the writing where it works that like she's like gold is like the source of her power to make Goldar, right? Because that makes sense. Because then if she's the Green Ranger, she has the gold guard thing. So I'm like, oh, I see the vision of the future, right? You see the vision of the future. You just never get it. So it's really like storytelling wise, it makes a lot of sense. But then when like you get Goldar is probably not my favorite execution of this movie, even though it does make sense. I just like okay, yeah, we have like the physical rendition of Goldar, but I'm like the things I love about Goldar. This isn't that Goldar. This isn't the Jason.
Goldar sucks. He's useless in the show.
That's the thing.
Useless in this. He actually has a purpose.
That's the thing. That's the reason I came to like be okay with. Like I didn't love it the first time I saw it. I was like, oh, that's how they're using Goldar, because I'm just so accustomed to him being, the henchman, the right hand man of Rita. But then I also thought about, I was like, yeah, he kind of does nothing in the show, though. Like, as we've seen in just like the 20 episodes we've watched, he always runs away because I don't know why. So it's like, okay, if you're gonna use him, you make him, the final boss in a way But I understand the idea of like you get it, but it just doesn't work for you. That makes sense too. It eventually worked for me, especially with the symbioteness. That's not a word, but the way him and Rita like just interact together. It's very
also the way the putties, right? The elements are like created in the same way. Though you two, Nick and no, tell me what you thought of Alpha. We didn't get together.
I mean, Alpha served his purpose, I think. I think I felt like he was funny. Like the second time, like the when I saw it this time, I was like, oh, he's pretty like enjoyable to have there. But I think it kind of masked with the whole like campiness of everything else, right? Like how he feels just makes me feel like it's not the same Alpha, or it's the exact same Alpha, but everything else is different, And like I don't know if that sort of works for me as much, because like he is just kind of like this zany character. Like I don't understand why he's not just like a voice in the wall, but then like Zordon's also a voice in the wall. So it's like, okay, you can't have two voices in the wall. But he served his purpose. Didn't distract. It didn't take me out, but it was like okay, yeah.
No, I liked Alpha. I really enjoyed Alpha. I mean, I think really what sells me every time I see this moment, we're skipping. I guess we're not really trying to go chronologically anyway, so it doesn't matter.
It's fine.
So if you haven't seen this movie, spoiler: when Billy dies, which bold move by the movie, by the way.
Yeah.
Like
straight up.
Even again in the commentary, they were like they went to Haim Saban and were like, yeah, we want to kill Billy. And she was like, excuse me? Like, so they had to like really explain the pitch in the cell and everything like that. Because it's a bold thing to kill a ranger, But when they bring Billy's body back into the command center and it's so subtle, it's so small, but they cut to Alpha and he just says Master Billy in a really like sullen way. I don't know. That for me is just like, and like even during the training montage, you see like the connection he kind of has with Billy more than anybody else, and that was really what endeared me to Alpha. Because I think Billy, like we were saying, Trini in the original MMPR is like the heart, but like in this it's Billy, and Billy's that connecting thread that like gets everybody together. And so like even him building that relationship with Alpha, building that relationship with Billy, I was just like, yeah, what more could you want? Like they show him specifically training with Billy. I don't think anybody else really trains with Alpha, in terms of combat and stuff like that. And then all these like moments, like they're trying to figure out the Zeo Crystal location and all this stuff. So just, and I liked the sarcasm, and he's kind of like, he's more quippy than MMPR Alpha. MMPR Alpha was kind of like, he had these one-liners that are meant to be funny, but like Alpha in this movie gave more of an attitude to the Rangers, and I kind of just appreciated that.
Yeah, he felt like an actual character.
Right.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think it's okay that he was campy because nothing else was. right? Like you need something that's kind of like, I guess, comedic relief almost, but he did feel like it's his own character and whatnot. So, and then going back to like the whole aesthetics, Akil, you're saying about the Zords, and they do make a Transformers joke with the Zords. But there's a couple of things I really liked about these new Zords. One, they jack in physically into their nervous system.
I like that.
Yeah, we don't
like
take
the
that.
spinal tap.
It's very good. Two, they're learning as they go with the Zords. It's not as intuitive. So the Megazord,
I don't know how to do this. I like that.
That gag was so good, by the way. The trip, like they forward the Megazord and then they just fall on their face.
So good. And it's funny because then they realize, oh, I'm the leg, I'm the leg, I'm the arm, right? So it's like, wait, we have to be more unified than. And it's funny because they're like, oh, Jason, did you punch the person slap Rita? But he didn't. And he's the head, right?
Yeah,
like,
oh yeah, I didn't catch that.
Which is like, okay, that ending is insane. Like, slap Rita into the sky, and like I remember watching that movie the first time. I was like, well, how else is she supposed to get to the moon?
Yeah.
That's what I thought too.
Like, punted into the moon.
Again, that was literally the conundrum. They're like, okay, we want to get her in that shot so they can show the moon and kind of like foreshadow, like she'll either end up on the moon or something. But like, how do we get her there? And someone said, just smack her there. I don't know. And then they're like, let's do that.
It's so
This
funny
movie is so good. Go ahead, Nick.
They were like, give us your coin and your staff. And she's like, no. And then they backhand her.
And she lunges.
Like, and they were like, we did it, guys. I was like, yes, didn't get the coin or the staff. Not just somewhere else.
Well, this coin and staff were on Earth somewhere, right? When she got punted, they fell, which is how we know that like that was meant to set up to Tommy because we saw that end scene where Tommy's coming. So the coin is somewhere on Earth. They just don't know where. Another thing I liked about the Zords, so the transformation from the Zord to the Megazord is one of my favorite things. I know a lot of people didn't like that. So they're physically getting crushed into each other. They fall into the Zeo crystal, and this is something that is so subtle, that's so amazing. That they were in the beginning, they're like the Zords take form as a primary being on Earth at the time it was dinosaurs, and now it's humans. And the Zord comes out and is a human because that is the primary being on Earth. I think it insinuates that they can't unzord. I don't know how they were going to do that in the future because now this is it, the Megazord. That's it.
Right.
But I really like that sequence, just watching them physically get crushed, put into the Zeo crystal, and come out as the Megazord, the Mama Zord, as Billy says. Yeah.
I just think it's wild that they everything they did in the movie was like earned, right? So them morphing was earned. The entire movie is about them. And they earn it by getting to know each other and recognizing their value as individuals, but also as a unit. And then even the Megazord becoming a thing was earned, right? They're holding the line. They're like, okay, we're just gonna, we die here. And like their courage, their bravery, their willingness to sacrifice themselves is what earned them the ability to become a Megazord. Like it's just, I think it's so well done.
It's so good.
Yeah.
The one criticism I hate hearing about this movie, and I feel like it started this movie started this trend where like I would see headlines. It was like the Power Rangers only morph for 15 minutes at the end of the movie. Yeah. And I remember hearing that. And I was like, they did the same thing in the original movie. They did the same thing in Turbo. Why is it any different here? I remember the Godzilla one was probably the biggest one. They're like, Godzilla's only for 11 minutes for Godzilla. And I'm like, so? Like, what's the
Jurassic Park was what, 7.5 minutes of dinosaurs?
Exactly. It's like,
it's fine.
I'm actually really
like it's awful, you know, but it's not. Like the whole point of them morphing was like character growth.
Right.
It's a very character driven story. So every time someone's like, oh, they didn't even morph for that long. It's like if you were to like divide the math of an episode of Power Rangers, it's the same amount of percentage. Like they don't morph until like the last like
7
minutes.
Yeah.
7 minutes. And then maybe it's like we're getting to the formula now where we're in our rewatch where like it's becoming formulaic, right? Human problem, monster problem, transform, big robot fight, human resolution. Like it gets there, and it's like that's what the movie was. There's a human problem, monster problem, giant robot fight. It's over. Like that's man,
that's the other thing, because same thing. I hate that criticism because I'm like, okay, well, what did you want? Did you want them to morph right in the beginning, get beaten by Rita, and then somehow find a way to beat her in the end, because that's literally every other superhero film. Every other superhero film is like, get powers, can't stand up to the villain at first, and then find a way at the end. Like, that's literally how instead, they were like, oh no, we're going to have you work on yourselves, focus on you as people and as a group, and then you eventually get to face the villain at once. And I was like, that's actually really, like, it's different, and it worked, and to me, it worked really well to just give us this, like, story that, there's this YouTuber, his name's called the Disney Brain, and he talks a lot about Power Rangers, and something he says that's always stuck with me is the Power Rangers are people first. And I'm like, that is 100% true. And the reason we fall in love with these characters is because of who they are, not just because they get into these costumes and do these cool, fights. It's because of who they are. So, like, they gave you an hour and a half of who they are. You got to know these characters. Like, I feel like I could hang out with Billy and we'd have a great time because I got to know him well enough through that time. So yeah, I hate that criticism too.
Yeah, and you have to love these characters the same way you love the original characters in the show, but the show gives you a longer time to get accustomed to them.
Yeah.
Right? Like I love these guys. I love these guys. I'm very sad I'm not going to ever see them again. Like, I miss them already.
I know.
Yeah. So I think it's just important to get to know them. Again, which is why that fireside scene is so important. Especially with Zach being like, I don't know if I have anybody else if my mom dies. And then Billy goes, I don't miss my dad anymore. Right? Yeah. It's like the same sentiment on two different sides of the same coin. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Can we talk about that scene? Because it is,
Okay.
I think most people's favorite scene is my favorite scene. Like, I can watch just that scene 1,000 times.
I want to start with Trini, because like I feel like we haven't talked about Trini too much. Trini in that scene is like my favorite thing, because her monologue about whether or not they're like Power Rangers or they're friends has something that has always like changed my perspective about the Power Rangers series as a whole. Because it's like, most Power Ranger series, like, we're all friends, Very rarely they start off as like adversarial or something like that. But like by episode like 4 or 5, like it's like, okay, yeah, we're a team, like whatever. Yeah. But in that moment, she's like questioning like their relationship, all of their relationships with each other, and like really explaining like how she views the world, right? And like her set of problems, and like. Trini in the movie is canonically queer, but there's more to her thought process and how she interprets like her relationship with her family that I feel is very like cultural. That feels very like because like when I was growing up, my dad was very much like assimilate. Like you have to be normal. Be normal. Is her brother twins? Does she have twins?
They're supposed to be, yeah.
Supposed to, like, like in that whole dynamic of like you're looking at her family, like on the surface, I was like, you have twins and you want to be like a normal family. Like, I'm not saying like you can't be a normal family with twins, but it's like your family is unique, and it's like you have this family dynamic that is like trying to force you to be quote unquote normal. It goes beyond than I think like just like the queer identity. Like there's a cultural identity there that she's trying to like figure out, and I always feel like that resonates like with how she interprets her relationship with everybody else, because she's the only one that's left questioning like, I don't know if we're friends,
Yeah.
And I think that carries on all the way to the end of the movie.
I think there's an also interesting moment, and maybe I'm reading too much into this, but I think Trini might have been saying they were non-binary, but I'm not sure, because there was a moment where they say that my parents like to put labels on everything. And I thought that was a really interesting thing to say. But then it's kind of flipped again at the end where they're like, oh, how do you know the Yellow Ranger is a boy? It could be a girl, insinuating that she thinks herself as a girl. But I think that also was a catch-22, like the little like nudge, hey, remember the original Yellow Ranger was supposed to be a boy and it was a girl. But it was just the wording of that sentence I thought was really interesting.
Wait, did she say it could be a girl? I thought she just said, how do you know it's a boy?
Oh, yeah.
She said it.
Yeah.
She does. Oh, maybe you're right.
She might have only said, how do you know it's a boy? Yeah.
Yeah, she questions it, but I don't think I could be wrong. I don't remember her saying it could be a girl.
I think you're right. I think she does just say, how do you know it's a boy?
Right.
Yeah.
Because both of those would be labels which she doesn't like, right?
Right.
That's true. We'll never know now.
Yeah.
Knowing.
It's like vagueness. The whole thing with Trini is vagueness, right?
Yeah.
She never really fully open says she's queer. She doesn't acknowledge.
She connects the team in a different way, as opposed to like, the original Trini. Because like the heart of the team kind of moves to Billy, so then Trini's left to be like kind of the grounded person of like, yeah, we're all superheroes. Yeah, we're all like, this is like a crazy scenario that we're in right now. Yeah. But also like I'm not gonna hang out with you at school. Like that's the reality of the situation.
Yeah. But then they do.
And then they do.
Yeah, I thought that was really cute, right? They're all hanging out and they're throwing the paper at each other. Let's start a band. Yeah. I love that scene. So in conjunction to this fireplace scene, and it's so deep and it's so moving, and then we have these little scenes where they're just throwing papers at each other, and it's so cute. It's so beautiful to see their friendship grow that way, in a serious way and in like just a loving way as well. And I think everyone in detention kind of sees that when Billy the next day after he gets his powers, and then immediately Kimberly's just like talking to him, and they're like, how do Kimberly and Billy even know each other?
Yeah.
It's just like the dynamic has shifted.
Yeah.
Immediately shifted. Yeah.
Nav, you were gonna say something with the fire pit scene?
I mean, there's so much to say. I love that scene for everything. Like the way it feels very authentic too, right? Like some people, first of all, they throw in a joke, right? Zach, he's just like very like whatever. He goes like, "My mom is the best," which I love. It's just such a I don't know. It gets me emotional when he does that. Just like even though it comes off very playful, but like he's clearly expressing it from that place of like that love, and then like Billy with the I love country music. Like there's just all these like little these smart easy things that they can do, and then they're like, okay, I'm gonna share this like real thing about me. And I just love that. And then some people hold back, like we don't really get anything from Kim and Jason in that moment, but it makes sense that not everybody is gonna just like divulge their biggest secret to people they're still relatively unfamiliar with. It was a course of 11 days, right? Like that's how long Alpha said they had. So that's not a long time to really get to know people, like, or be that willing to trust them. So I loved it. And then the fact that the way it was shot, it was just like we were a part of this, like we were sitting there. That's how it felt. Like we were sitting there watching them and like part of the conversation ourselves. And it's such a good scene. It's
such a good scene. I love. Sorry, go ahead, Nick.
No, I was like, Akil, do you have any like thoughts on the fire pit scene?
Nothing that hasn't already been said. I think like, I think the movie took a very bold step in having them not be friends at the beginning, like the show has. And so like, not just the fire pit scene, but you catch these little moments between them of sort of like little connections here and there, and then obviously the fireplace scene is the culmination of that. So it was, I think it was very well done.
During the training sequence, right? Like you see they have Trini and like Kimberly have like a connection.
Just gonna bring that up.
They're very in sync. Just as an asterisk, they are very in sync. But yes, do continue.
What was funny though, like during I realized in this last rewatch is like none of them are wearing their associated colors during the training sequence. They're all just kind of like, because Billy has a yellow headband.
But I thought his jacket was blue though.
No, I remember watching. I replayed it twice, and I don't remember all the details. But I was like, nobody has their associated colors, because I think it was supposed to portray like they're still not there, but they're trying really hard.
Yeah.
But the biggest relationship that we haven't talked about yet is the Zordon Jason relationship. That is like, I think personifies his like despise for his father and his
daddy
like,
issues.
For his daddy issues.
Daddy issues, Jason.
Yeah. And like that intense scene before the fire pit scene where Jason goes to talk to Zordon.
Yeah.
And like I just think it's so funny when Jason walks in and Zordon like turns his head and he's like, "Oh, you've been here the whole time." Like that's such a that's like I've never gotten so much raw emotion from a wall. Like it's so funny to me. Because like Zordon, aren't you part of the ship? Can't you like
I know.
Hell?
Maybe he's just in front of the wall and isn't connected anywhere else, and that's why he needs Alpha, because he didn't know they came on the ship as well.
Right.
Alpha had to be like grab them and bring them. Anyways, go ahead.
Yeah, but like that dynamic is just like I think is really compelling. I feel like that was the Zordon like I've always wanted. This kind of like asshole who's like willing to take advantage of the children. You know, it's always been a joke in like the Power Ranger community. It's like he's just child soldiers, you know, and it's like he really is that guy in this movie. He's this child soldier guy, willing to do literally anything. And then that dynamic he's just sharing with Jason, like, you are the leader, I was the leader, and Jason's like, your team is dead for a reason. Like, you didn't do a great job the first time, and now it's our turn to do it differently this time, you know?
Yeah.
And it's good relationship.
It is such a good relationship paralleling the father, as you said. And I think the father, at the end of the day, realizes that it was Jason trying to grab his hand. Because, you know, at the scene, you see him put a newspaper clipping on the fridge about the Power Rangers. So it's like insinuated. Another relationship I like a lot is Trini and Zach. So in the original, like Trini and Billy were kind of the dynamic duo. But Trini and Zach here, they have such a fun little quippy relationship. I think... So Jason and Kimberly are like the duo here, and then Jason and Billy are also the duo here. But for the first time, we see Trini and Zach together. And I love that because it's clear that there's no romantic implication behind it, but they can be playful with each other in a way that you like. It's just more fun. You can push the limits of that friendship a little bit more because there's no way there's going to be a romantic relationship between the two. So like when they're like, when Trini falls on him or whatever, and they're just kind of like, oh, you know, could be, haha, whatever. It's like not romantic or sexual at all. And it's just like these guys are just fun together. And you know, he calls her crazy girl, and they really just kind of have this like love-hate relationship with each other. And I think I really like that as well.
I like their like ignitive personalities, I guess, because they're just so drastically different, and it's just like they hate each other, but also like I feel like they have the most interesting like dynamic, like the funnest dynamic.
Yeah,
for sure. Especially when you introduce them, it's like, "Hey, crazy girl!" Like,
homeboy.
That's what. Yeah, he's like, you mean like standing on a bunch of rocks doing, you know, kung fu or whatever? And he's like, I see you. And he's like, Or
that's my favorite intro ever. Trini's just on a mountain doing, I don't know what she's doing, listening to like heavy metal music. And I was like, that's a vibe.
So she climbs the wall when she has her powers, and I'm like, climbs the wall. This Trini is not afraid of heights.
That's true. That's
biggest character change. She can climb a wall.
It's funny. So since you mentioned her introduction, another thing from the commentary was they were all kind of introduced from like behind the head and then coming around because like the theme was like unmasking yourself and discovering who you are. So they were all introduced in this way that was kind of like they were not, you know, fully shown in the beginning and then brought to light. So like, I don't these like these little details, but I think
cinematography in this movie is really good. Especially it's phenomenal.
Dude, the like the opening has the 2 one-shots like right in the beginning, like Zordon's crawling, and that's a whole one-shot until like Rita comes, and then Jason has the card scene is a one-shot as well. Like it's I was just like, where did this come from?
The Last of Us scene, the Last of Us shot, they did it before it was cool.
This movie should not have been this good.
No,
right.
Right.
No, that's what I'm saying.
So good and felt so badly. It's like the tragedy of Power Ranger history.
Yeah.
It just
people cared. People really cared to make this story and make this film, and like that's another element of it that really frustrates me. Like you can tell no one is not giving their best in this movie, whether it's in front of the camera or behind the camera. Like you got Bryan Cranston, Bill Hader, and Elizabeth Banks, who realistically, when they were all announced, I was like, I cannot believe this movie has these 3 names on it. And like, dude, Elizabeth Banks gives so much. So the scene where she eats the gold, that was her improv. She just decided, I'm just gonna eat this gold. Like she just went for it. I was like, what? Even that same scene,
Rita.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
That same scene. Sorry, just quickly. Same scene. Another improv from her was when the police officer comes in and says like, "Put your hands up, lady," or something like that. She says, "I like the sound of lady," and like that was also improv. Like she was just like fully immersed in Rita, and I love
Giving it her all. I will say
this movie's controversial still to this day. because like I'm pretty active on Power Ranger and like Tokusatsu Twitter, and I've lost people. I've lost like mutual ships talking about this movie because like I just disagree with people who are like. I've seen people who are like, you know, they post the poster and they talk about it. And I was like, this movie was this movie was the reason like the Power Ranger brand like was damaged. And I was like, I feel like we're on totally different ends of the spectrum. There's no way we're watching the same movie.
I know. It's funny because the person who I went to watch the movie with felt the same way, and it's just so jarring. Like, I'm like, did we watch the same movie? Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. I'd lose friendships over this movie.
It's funny because like Akhil's criticism was that like, oh, it has that darker or grittier whatever like aesthetic and everything. But what's funny is people crave that so much.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm even more confused, because like I personally don't care for it. Right? I felt it worked here because of what they did. Right? They didn't just introduce these 5 pure angel teenagers in this dark world. Right? They made them more grounded, I guess, in a way, or just like more relatable, and so it fit that whole aesthetic of like their personalities and everything. Because I feel like if you did that, where you just took like the 5 characters from the show and plopped them in this world, it would not make sense at all, right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, but everybody wants this. Everybody's like, oh yeah, like this would be so much better if it was like rated R and stuff like that. I'm like, but so I'm confused when like I understand the criticism, but it's just really interesting that a lot of people didn't like it. I think partially because of that.
Yeah, no, you're right. Okay, so every single thing before this movie came out, every single fan film, every single fan fiction,
oh my gosh,
it was always Power Rangers but dark. And when I heard that this movie before it came out was gonna do that, I was so upset.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, they're falling into this. When I watched it, I'm like, oh, it's not as dark as I thought it would be, because if you watch some of the fan fiction that came out, like fan movies that came out,
movie.
Yeah, that one movie.
I hate that movie. I hate that movie.
So it's not on the same level. So why is this something that everyone wanted but are disappointed that that's what they got? This is a more realistic, dark Power Ranger film than any of the fan fiction that's out there. And I you know me, I'm like the toot for the fan fiction, right? But
no, I completely, I don't want to say anything incriminating to the Power Rangers fan base, because I feel like I've secretly become a villain within that space, and I'm just like, I don't want to talk to any of you guys, because there's very strong opinions that exist in the Power Rangers fan space, and it's I've gotten into so many arguments, I've gotten into so many squabbles about certain opinions, and I'm just like, everyone's got strong opinions about this movie in particular.
It's so funny because we're clearly on different sides of the fan fiction. I mean, I watched all the dark stuff, but like all the fan fiction that I've seen usually is like, and then they sat around and had coffee. Like, this is the best fan fiction I've ever read.
Akil, do you have any other like outlying criticisms or like any notes you had as a new viewer?
I got so many notes.
Okay,
bring it on.
Let's go to it.
As this discussion is going, I'm realizing that none of my problems with the movie, none of my criticisms are from the Power Ranger-ness of the movie. It's all just because this movie is a product of its time. And like you were saying, like people wanted the dark and gritty, people wanted the R-rated, but it doesn't work with Power Rangers. It doesn't mesh well with what Power Rangers from the first half of the first season that I've seen.
You're right.
So
it doesn't mesh with Power Rangers.
And I understand that. I think because later seasons do get, again, not dark, but have a bit more grounded nature to them. I think that's why for us who have seen those seasons, we're like, oh, this is kind of like that. You know, like I would argue it's on par with like RPM tone wise. You know.
Oh my God, you're right. It feels like RPM. Yeah.
Right. Even Time Force or In Space, like there's this like heaviness to those seasons that like visually it's a little darker, but like, you know, so I do wish it was a little brighter at some points, but yeah, like tone wise I think it matches some of these other seasons that we've seen. So I was just like, yeah, that's why I love In Space. Like it has that seriousness and like, again, it's not dark and gritty and just like for the sake of being shock value, but it has like they're not
as assholey in Power Rangers ever.
Sure.
Yeah. But I'm agreeing with what you're saying.
Yeah. So it's I think that's why for us, maybe that's why we are all looking at it that way. Like, I just realized this, by the way. This is an in-moment, like, oh, it's kind of like RPM. Like, I just clicked in my brain.
One of the reasons I love Time Force so much is because that's the season I saw with my mom,
Mm.
and the reason my mom loves that season is because of the romance between Wes and Wes and Captain Jen. And it's
man.
I never got it, and then I rewatched it. I was like, "This is just a soap opera."
Yeah,
This is just a soap opera.
Dude.
Every episode.
The trauma I have from that not kiss.
Oh my god! Forget it.
At least they said "I love you" to each other, though. At least we got that much.
At least they hugged.
But speaking of a relationship between Red and Pink, I thought it was really interesting what we had in this movie because it was pointing to them being romantic, right?
Right.
But thank goodness, because this was again
noted in the toxic relationship.
Yeah.
This is a toxic relationship.
But so this was noted in the commentary, right? He said that the test audiences didn't like the kiss because they felt it took away from Kimberly's moment, right? Like this was her moment to be vulnerable and open, and it kind of again, she was in service to a man kind of thing, right? And so I was like, good on you, test audiences, and good on you, director, for listening, because it works so much better as a friendship. I just like that everybody is friend. Like if we want to go that dynamic, if we wanted to go that dynamic in the future with any of them, I would be okay in the future to start exploring it. But I think establishing them as a group of friends first is better than now these two are paired off kind of thing, one way or the other, whether it was, Zach with Trini or whatever potential things there could be. I'm glad that it just was oh no, they're all friends that just care about each other. And I think that's summed up in Billy's scene in his death and everything like that and the reaction.
Okay, so when you say that, I know when exactly that kiss would have taken place, and that does make me feel a little bit icky.
It was in the trailer.
I don't remember. Oh my god, I have to look that up.
Yeah, watch the trailer. It's insane.
They're about to kiss in the trailer, and then they just don't have that scene, which is best.
That's so interesting. I do ship them, but asterisk. It works as a friendship thing in this movie because specifically of the way they made Zach and Trini have that same relationship. Mm-hmm. Right. So because Zach and Trini have the same kind of relationship that Jason and Kimberly have, with the googly eyes at each other and stuff. But Zach and Trini's is purely platonic. This can be purely platonic.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have to go look up this trailer. It's been so long. Actually, when you said that, I had a flashback of a kiss somewhere. I'm like, was that in my subconscious?
No, it was almost real. It was filmed. It just didn't come to fruition.
If it wasn't at that moment, it would be okay. Right? That is such a vulnerable moment. I think that's why it wouldn't work to put it in that moment, because it's I did this kind of inappropriate thing with someone's nudes.
Yeah.
And that
if it happened, I'd be like, oh, you guys are just both shitty people.
Yeah.
It's just both shitty people celebrating a shitty moment. It just seems like such a toxic relationship.
Yeah.
It's oh my god.
The movie, I'd be on board. I'd be really excited for that kiss, but no.
Yeah, I'm gonna talk about my wife for a little bit, but she loves reading Star Wars fan fiction, and the Kylo Ren fan fiction she tells me about constantly. It's just this moment sounds on par with what she's been telling me that she's been reading. I would not want that. And also just it's interesting to think about that dynamic if it moved forward, because obviously Tommy would have came in. Mm-hmm. And then was that going to be a love triangle?
Oh, that would have been the worst.
It would have been the worst.
It would have been the worst.
Would have been so bad.
So bad.
Because they are teenagers. There's parts of teenage life dating, and, discovering who you are and stuff like that.
It would be so fun to see. I imagine it'd be so hard to not go that direction in their minds too. If that was already set up, and then you introduce Tommy, I would even if I was a writer, I'd be tempted to do it because it's just right there for the taking. But
listen, I am a sucker for love triangles. Okay, I'm sorry.
No, I like them, but I just don't need it in this situation. I just don't need it in this situation.
The character dynamic, though, moving on to a sequel, right? Jason and Tommy would have this power dynamic, seeing who's a leader, and then Kimberly's just a plot device to kind of play between both of them.
And then what are the rest? Like, it just feels like it would just become that, and like
if like you don't commit, if you don't do a Twilight thing, like it's like, oh, she's just kind of there, you know what I mean?
Oh no, Team Jason or Team Tommy.
No, I wouldn't like that. But the thing is, the reason that they didn't do a kiss, so now that they had Jason and Tommy come in, if they were going to do a sequel, it would parallel literally what was happening in the show, where Jason and Kimberly were really, really like close in the beginning, and then Tommy comes and they're like get into a romantic relationship, and this is what exactly would parallel that. I had to go look up this trailer.
Akil, I have a question.
I have an answer.
Because I do really love this scene. Rita's introduction scene, which was like the dream sequence thing. Sorry, I guess it's not her introduction scene, but her introduction to the Rangers.
Yes.
What did you think about that?
Hated it.
What did you say?
It.
Hated it.
I hated it.
Why?
This is why you're getting kicked off the podcast. Maybe just defriended some people. Defriended.
I gotta hear this.
Yes, do continue.
Okay, so that scene I watched twice.
Okay.
Because one, it terrified me the first time, so I didn't take anything in. I didn't absorb anything.
Sure.
And then I watched it a second time, and I'm like, okay, none of this makes sense. Like,
what do you mean it doesn't make sense?
It doesn't make sense. Like, one does. So I guess thinking back now, like, the townspeople were like resembling putties because Rita makes putties, and like, so it's like they're turning into clay, maybe, I think.
Maybe.
But also, like, Jason doesn't care about the people around him. So why would he be concerned that like the town is falling apart or it's gonna die or whatever?
He does care. He cares in his heart.
He cares.
In that moment, though?
No, but they also don't know what's going on.
They also don't know what's going on. Yeah.
So it's more of just like, that's a body that just disintegrated. What the heck just happened?
It's
kind of
scary.
thing.
Even if you don't care about people and you see people dying around you, like you're
That's
gonna be
true.
like,
I think the community center in the show really establishes them caring about the community, because they in their show they like care about the community, they do community things. So like their identity is also is part of who they are as characters.
Sure.
In the movie, it's like they literally leave town to go train and do whatever. They go to high school, but they don't. There's really nothing that like connects them to the city.
Sure.
So like when Jason's like, we could just dip. Like when she goes to Kimberly, like, oh, we could just leave. It's like, okay, yeah, because like I don't know anything about this town. And then like, Jason does like a 180 and is like, as much as I hate this town, we got to go protect it. And I was like, okay, he's a good guy. I don't know why he cares about the town, but like at least he cares about.
I mean, it was more of. It was more of if I don't do anything, it'll happen. Like it's gonna eventually happen to them too. Like if she just takes over, kind of thing. That's how I interpreted it. Like, because he was like, well, the Earth will be destroyed if I don't do anything. So, like,
when I look at it, and I could just be reading into it, I think Jason always cared. So if you look at why he's a degenerate, it's not because he doesn't care. It's because he is fighting against this image that he always has. And in that scene where he's like, let's run away from each other. I feel like he was hesitant, right? Like Kimberly was on board, let's run away, and he's like, oh, are you testing me, blah, blah, blah. Like it's more of like a quippy, like playful thing. For like the way I read it, I think he, in his heart, always cared. He just was incapable of showing it. Again, because he's like fighting this personality of himself. We're reaching the end of our hour. Let's talk about final thoughts. Let's talk about the cameo. Really, really important.
Which cameo? There's so many.
Cameo of actor Tommy and actor Kimberly.
Yes.
Yes.
Tommy and Kimberly, presumably a couple, which is nice to see.
Yeah.
Yes, it's very nice that they are presumably a couple.
Oh no, did I say the wrong thing?
It took me a second.
There's too much to unpack there.
Okay, all right.
I didn't even think about that, actually. Even like as many times as I've seen this movie, I did not think of it that way. I was just like, oh, it's a cameo. I did not think of it like, oh, they're like standing there like they're a couple.
Yeah, they're standing next to each other. The weird thing happens and they look at each other first.
They're also it's so funny because that shot's funny because they are in their colors and like everything else is this very like gray toned.
Desaturated
It's
early.
It's very weird.
The early 2010s, like desaturated.
Yeah, exactly. Everything else is like very just gray, and there's just like they're pink and green, just like, oh, there it is. They're actually in another cameo, but it was cut from the movie. Like, so it's in a deleted scene. The scene where Kimberly and Trini are doing playing the game with the donut piece during the montage. So there's like a shot of the two of them watching the two of the girls. So yeah,
cute. I love that.
Yeah, so I don't know if it was implying like, oh, we're rangers who know what's going on. I was curious. That's what I started thinking. I was like, oh, is that what it is, or they're just observing two people do weird things with a piece of donut?
I would observe that too, for sure.
That's true.
Yeah, they were really good at it. And also, that was a cute like relationship moment between Kimberly and Trini, and they're becoming friends. So let's say, in conclusion, final thoughts, Akil.
In conclusion, I really liked this movie. I think I'm going to turn the brightness up and the saturation up next time I watch it.
Nice. Yeah, I'm glad you're going to watch it again, because it's definitely worth a rewatch. We know our opinion. We're definitely five stars for us.
Full 5.
This one flips between number 1 and number 2 for me.
Oh,
movies of all time?
Yeah, this is like one of my, because I think it's for me, it's like my top 5 or top 3 list is like not movies that are like I think are perfect, but like movies that have like changed my life, you know.
Yeah,
and this
that's a
movie
good.
has like changed my life drastically. You know what I mean? Like it completely again, like I think I said it earlier, but it like completely shifted my way of thinking about Power Rangers, like moving forward in the fandom. And I'm like, this is I've never looked at Power Rangers the same since. And with how big like that piece of media is to my life, it's like, well, this is kind of life changing for me, right? Like it's because it does encapsulate a lot of things that I feel about Power Rangers now.
Yeah, that's why it's going to be interesting with the reboot.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Which breaks my heart, like nail in the coffin. I was like, maybe we can get the same actors come back, but maybe it could be like, but no. It'll be interesting. It's like a completely different company, right? Like it's Hasbro now. Yeah.
Hasbro, yeah. I did see a tweet. I think they're all still friends. I know Becky G and Naomi Scott still like they joke on Twitter about like remaking Power Rangers. I don't know about anybody else that like talks, but like it's the movie's a cult classic for sure.
Yeah.
Like, it's gonna live forever in the Power Rangers fandom, whether people like it
or not. It's true.
It's gonna be there.
Yeah. Letty Lynn also would love to have a sequel, but he like knows it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
He's like, he always says, "A boy can dream," was his exact words. Anyways, that's it for this week. We'll be doing our regularly scheduled episodes, except for, the anniversary that's coming out next week. So we'll do a special episode for that. We're all going to watch it. We're all very hyped. It'll be definitely interesting for Akil, who has missed years and years and years of knowledge.
Oh yeah, 29 and a half years of missed knowledge.
I don't know how much there will be to that though. Like,
we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
I know about Billy and Zach and Rita.
There you go.
Hopefully, you don't need to know more than that.
No, I'm pretty shaken.
Not too much.
Oh my god, yeah. It's going to be fun. We're super excited. Until next time, I'm Minhas. I'm joined with Akil, Nick, and Nev. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Once a Ranger, always a Ranger.